Welcome, everyone, to A Mexican Crossing Lines with your host, Cindy Gomez-Schempp.
And Duke Gomez-Schempp.
You're listening to 88.1 FM, KPPP, LP, Fargo-Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. And tonight, my show is focused on the reopenings in many states coming as early as May 1st for business as usual, back to business. What is very frightening, however, is the very unclear guidance, suggestion, not orders, not safety, but suggestions on a volunteer basis of what we should and shouldn't do. It varies widely from state to state, from industry to industry, from business to business. And amidst all of this chaos and fear, we have a federal government and we have state directives from our governors that seem to echo that uncertainty, with everything from Vice President Mike Pence ignoring hospital-wide rules at the Mayo Clinic by not wearing the mandatory face masks inside of a hospital. And governors in the most unprepared states, as classified by the Wall Street Journal, like Georgia, reopening when they are woefully unprepared to do so. I'll get a pulse on how the rest of the country is feeling about that, and also the impending shortages of food, specifically in our meat production, and what our government, our industries are planning to do in response. All of that tonight on a Mexican Crossing Lines. But first, I want to thank all of you for being here, for supporting our work, and for following us on social media. Duke, how can folks get at us?
Well, they can get at us lots of ways, and it's really glad to have you all joining in tonight. We didn't do a show yesterday. We just kind of extended our weekend. I got some more things done in our home. Have to take care of ourselves, you know. But you can get a hold of us many ways, and we love that you are watching on either YouTube or Facebook. Our YouTube channel is Duke1517. Our Facebook channel is 88.1 Fargo-Moorhead Radio. Plus, we have Mexi-Can and the People's Press Project. You can go to kpppfm.com and have a look around at our programming, and also go to that donate tab and support our work. kpppfm.com/donate. We're a nonprofit organization. Your donation is tax deductible. That'll help us move our work forward, and we really appreciate that. If you want to call us and leave your lovely voice on a voicemail for us, you can call 701-566-0917. Again, that number is 701-566-0917.
I have a comment from Charlene Dupuy. She said she was worried about us, and she waited last night, and when we didn't come, she got very worried.
Oh.
I'm so sorry, Charlene. I feel terrible about that. I will say that, and I do not mean in any way to diminish the essential workers out there who are literally on the front lines. But the stress, the constantness of being a reporter during the pandemic, where you're you're literally a lightning rod for people's chaotic emotions, fears, calls of desperation, and we in the media can't look away. Not on the days off that we have, not on business work days. We have to constantly be aware of it, on the clock, off the clock. And we also have to try to be good pandemic partners in this household and take care of everything that we have to do for our family. Just like everyone else, trying to do the best that we can. And it can be a lot. It can get to be so overwhelming that you just need to take a break. And that was what was going on with us.
Oh, yeah.
We did do a lot of work over the weekend
Mm-hmm.
to get stuff rolling in our garden, and we were doing that again. So here's, what all of that stress will do. It'll make you exhausted. It'll make it so you need to take some you time, some me time, and get back to feeling ready to work. And I think it was a very good use of our time to take that day
Oh, yeah.
off. It was nice and sunshiny outside.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I went outside and everything, put a hammock up, and I'll be more. I'll think about that more. If like I didn't make any posts that day, so I suppose people kind of went, "There's no post, there's no show," because this stuff can hit you hard. I mean, it can hit people fast. I mean, within a day or two, they can be down for the count, and it's like you just never know what's going to happen to someone.
That's true. I appreciate that. We have people out there that are watching for us and worried for us. So thank you for that. That's really kind. I want to have a difficult conversation with Americans tonight. And I know that there are people in every walk of life in this country right now that are hurting, that are traumatized, that are suffering on one level or another level. I realize that. I am trying to document what's happening. I'm trying to bring you the most salient points of information so that you can make the best decisions for your family during this pandemic. But I also think that we need to point out the perspectives that are going on. For the last week, I've been bringing you news of all the different protests that have been taking place across our country, demanding that the government reopen. Those continued even today. New Jersey was protesting. There's a protest in Trenton, New Jersey that looked like had hundreds, if not thousands of people protesting, demanding the reopening of government. And the question begs, are we making a mistake that will put us in a bigger hurt bag than where we are right now? Well, there have been ongoing stories of farmers having to plow under their crops, milk having to be poured down the drain, millions of gallons. And now we know we're having to euthanize animals. We're having to euthanize pigs. We're going to see a shortage of meat. And before I came on the air to talk to you about the events of the last couple of days, I found out that the breaking news is that President Donald Trump is going to sign an executive order making meat plants stay open as workers continue to get sick and die.
Wow.
He's planning on declaring meat processing plants critical infrastructure under the Defense Protect. What's it called?
Defense Powers Act? Is that what it is? Or
No, I think it's Defense Production Act.
Okay.
It's called the Defense Production Act. Under the Defense Production Act, the president has the power to declare that. Does it say right there? Yes, it says. Donald Trump plans to order meatpacking plants to continue operating, declaring them critical infrastructure as the nation confronts growing disruption in the food supply chain. Trump will use the Defense Production Act to order the company to stay open. The government will also provide additional protective gear for employees as well as guidance, according to the person. Well, as you may know, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration and companies had not been doing enough to protect their workers from this fast-spreading outbreak. And that is what is now hobbling production in our supply chain, because we've got a number of plants all throughout the country that have had to shut down because of these outbreaks. On Tuesday, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and OSHA released interim guidance. This, I'm assuming, is the Tuesday they're speaking of, for meat packing and processing facilities. It outlined procedures for cleaning shared equipment, reconfiguring workstation. It also included information on how companies can use physical barriers to put at least 6 feet between employees so that they're following the CDC guidelines on social distancing. Excuse me. So last week, I remembered that this actually came out because that's when they went to places like L&M and J.R. Simplot and other big factories and producers locally and said, hey, the CDC guidelines are saying this. You guys got your house in order?
Yeah.
And we found out here locally that doesn't work. You can't just call down there and say, hey, you guys doing what you're supposed to be doing? Because apparently they can just say, yeah, we're doing it. We're doing the thing. Nobody will come and check.
Mm-hmm.
And people then end up getting sick like they did here by lying. So we know that happens. We know that employers aren't always following the rules, haven't been following them up until this point. But now we have an order from the president that is going to throw a monkey wrench in all of it. This call for the use of protective gear that the President's Protection Defense Act use suggests will be voluntary and non-enforceable. I want to make that very clear. Mm-hmm. The government is going to, I'm assuming the government is now going to provide PPE, appropriate PPE, like essential workers and healthcare workers have, but for meat packers. And that they will be replenishing this PPE on a regular basis, or are they going to have them recycle it like they do at the hospitals? I guess it doesn't really matter because none of it's enforceable anyway. Mm-hmm. Debbie Berkowitz, a former senior OSHA official who's an expert on meat processing, said these outbreaks that have sickened thousands and killed dozens were not inevitable in the meat industry. If OSHA had started enforcement, employers like the meatpacking industry, who don't prioritize safety voluntarily, would have implemented the CDC guidelines and prevented these outbreaks of death and disease in the meatpacking industry in the first place. But they didn't do that. And now, with the virus running amok through our country and plants closing all over the place, the food supply has been disrupted. Recently, the owner of the CEO of the Tyson company took out a full-page ad saying as much, prompting the president to finally use the Defense Production Act, but not to ensure that American manufacturers are producing protective equipment essential to healthcare workers and other essential workers, like apparently now meat packers. Instead, Trump is only using the Defense Production Act to try to force workers back to jobs that are unsafe. According to the according to the Washington Post, the president has just undermined all efforts to stop the spread of the disease in plants, Berkowitz is quoted as saying. He is essentially saying they must be allowed to operate and that there should be no specific requirements plants must follow to stop the spread of disease. Well, this isn't the first time that President Trump and his administration are sending out confusing doublespeak messages. And I told you there's a reason why. It is meant to allow them to escape liability. Want to know how I know that? Because all of this is signaling, right? It's a signal meant to dog whistle to industry leaders and economic analysts and advisors to say to industry, wink, wink, the president's got you, boo.
Yep.
The Defense Protection Act says you're an essential service, and guess what? As an essential service, the government is basically holding you harmless, protecting you under the under their liability as a government to make these decisions in an emergency, in a crisis, or in a war scenario. They're protecting your business under this umbrella that says you can break contracts, you can break laws in order to complete the requested contract with the government, and it has to go to the front of the line, and you have to produce it for them. You can't close your business because it is considered, it's just been commandeered by the government as an essential business. Well, you know what? That would work, and it would also extend to the lives of the employees, their personal bodies as property, if we still lived under slavery. Then it would be okay for the president to dog whistle or signal, because it's not explicitly stated in any of the things that the president and his order are putting out there. This means you can force your workers to go to work and treat them like your slaves. It doesn't say that anywhere in the Defense Production Act. But the headlines that you're seeing, the headlines that we're talking about in the Washington Post and Political, seem to imply that because the president signed this executive order under the Defense Production Act, workers will be forced to go back to work because they're going to be considered essential workers even as they are dying. I'm here to tell you, I don't think that's true. If I'm still in America and we still have a constitution, in the Fifth Amendment, it says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness, life being the important one there, without the due process of law. Slaves, though, were understood to be property. Okay? So you could deprive a slave as your property of their life, of their liberty, and you could do it without due process. But of course, whoopsie doodle, we abolished slavery. Remember that? Remember that thing we did? So yeah, your Defense Production Act gives the authority to the president to tell the company, you have to build bombs now, or you have to build airplanes now. But it doesn't force the employees that work there to be forced to return to work, especially under substandard health conditions that violate the rules set forth by the CDC for safety and health during a pandemic. You cannot force a human being, unless they're your slave, into involuntary servitude, to forced labor. That's what I'm saying. So there's still a problem here. How are you going to force people who don't see safe distance happening in their plants, who are watching their coworkers drop like flies? How do you force them? You know, you can convince someone, especially groups of immigrants, large swaths of the population that maybe don't even speak very good English. I am uniquely equipped to speak on this topic because as a paralegal that worked in the field of workers' comp for a large percentage of the time that I was a paralegal, which was for around 2 decades of my life, in the heart of America, in the Midwest, raised in Iowa, I got to, and as a translator, I got to see and work firsthand with people in agriculture and meat packing specifically. These are places that have historically ignored the safety and well-being of their workers in America. Why? Because a lot of them were illegal. So if one of them, because of the poor safety standards in these places that don't pay you enough, that definitely are not going to cover sick leave, they'll just fire you and replace you with someone else if you can't make it in. And a lot of these folks don't have any recourse. If they try to get some kind of workers' compensation, if they have a very severe injury, they're merely reported and deported. I mean, that's been the history of meatpacking. Is it that way in the amounts and the percentages it was before? I don't know. I've been doing media work for a while now, and I haven't been as connected to talking on a regular basis with the workers in meatpacking. But what I can tell you is I see a lot of brown faces, some of them darker, some of them from Central America. The mix may be different, but the people are still the same. Usually poor access to health care, lacking in benefits all around, low wages, unsafe conditions, many of them immigrants, a lot of them without good English, and a good percentage of them that are illegal, but still working somehow. COVID has only exacerbated that by 1,000%. So what's happening in those plants is people are getting sick. While Smithfield ignored and or lied to its employees, right now there is employees from Missouri, a plant in Missouri, that are suing Smithfield. So the lawsuits, as I told you, this is about liability. The lawsuits are coming. They're coming for the cruise ship industry. They're coming for the meatpacking industry. They're going to be coming. I am not the lawyer suing our government. I am not the lawyer suing the meatpacking industry. I put away your pitchforks. Okay? I am merely the messenger. I can prove to you that these lawsuits are coming. I can prove to you that this has to do with liability, and it has to do with liability for these companies. I can prove it to you because I'm sharing the links. I'm sharing the citations. You can get mad at me for reporting on the truth all you want. It doesn't make it go away. It doesn't make the lawsuits go away. They're coming. And I'm here to tell you that the Defense Protection Act doesn't have the power to force those people to go in there. You'd have to use guns. You'd have to treat people as slaves and take away some people's right and say, you're going to be the slave class and your life is expendable and you have to be dragged in chains into your workplace. And if we're not willing to do that, we're going to have to come up with the better plan. Lying to people wholesale and telling them that the Defense Protection Act or executive order by Donald Trump means you have to be forced to go back to work in unsafe conditions is a lie. Straight out of hell. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't have to. Y para la gente que no me entiende en inglés, si se espantaron cuando vieron que el presidente firmó una orden ejecutiva diciendo que tienen que regresar a trabajar en las matanzas, no es cierto. Nadie le puede obligar que tenga que ir a dar su vida, a poner su vida en riesgo por una compañía. Nadie le puede obligar a dejar a sus hijos huérfanos. Nobody can obligate you to leave orphan children. Nadie le puede obligar a dejar a su esposa. Nobody can obligate you to leave a spouse. Nadie le puede obligar a ir a un lugar de condiciones inseguras. Nobody can force you to go work in unsafe work conditions. Ni de poner su vida en riesgo or to risk your life. Now, if the president wants to make an announcement that he is willing to give a pathway to citizenship, amnesty to illegal immigrants, many of whom are sitting in a detention facility right now, some of whom are even already working in these plants, and let them choose. Listen, if we're going to be brought up and forced to go into places that are unsafe and that could kill us, like this is some version of the Hunger Games, then I want to be able to choose whether or not I'm tribute. Don't we have that right to say, okay, I'm going to be the sacrifice for my neighborhood or for my family. I'm going to go in there and chop up that cow. I'm going to go in there and chop up that pig. But you can't force at gunpoint or under chains a bunch of people to go out there and do it. We know we don't have that capacity under the law, no matter how they want to spin it at the White House. The reality is that unions are paying attention. They have condemned this order, which is anticipated at any moment. It's already been announced, so it's probably going to be going forward. But labor advocates have turned to the courts to force companies to abide by healthcare rules. So, and there's lawsuits, like I told you, all over the place. Here is what this presidential order and this designation under the Defense Protection Act can't do. It can't dissolve legal liabilities from workers' claims of not being adequately protected. It does not dissolve, it does not evaporate workers' rights, CDC orders. It does not take away the liability of the company, of the plant, or of the federal government. Okay? So, if you're being told, let me just repeat this for the people in the back, that you have to be forced to go back to work, if you're a person that is a vulnerable adult, if you have comorbidities, if you have underlying health conditions, etc., 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 no, nobody can force you to give up your life. I'm sure that our president can come up with better ideas of how to get people to voluntarily put their life at risk. We have heroes that do that every day. What do we do for them? We offer them PPE. We make safer work conditions for them, and we offer them hazard pay. And you know what? We're going to come up, we're going to have to come up with some other creative things. But no, you cannot force people to go put their lives on the line. That would be unethical and illegal. And no, the Defense Production Act or a president's order telling people that work at meatpacking plants they have to go to work are going to work. They're not going to work. For some people, for poor people, for poor working class people, and this is not just brown and black people, this is all poor working class people, which in North Dakota includes a lot of white folks. In Minnesota includes a lot of white folks. You're working class folks too. And all of you are going to be put into situations where you're going to have to choose right now whether you go back to work or you try to continue to live off your savings, find other safer employment, find a way to work from home in an effort to save your life, especially if you have an underlying condition. Because in North Dakota and in many other states around this country, governors have decided that your nightmare in trying to get unemployment is ending soon because you're going to have to go back to work. Even as there is no even equitable enforcement of any kind of rules, federal or state, about how to keep us safe. And that is terrifying. I'm going to look at those rules for North Dakota, and we'll talk about them here in a minute. First, I want to take a look at the world numbers. Why is this concerning? Well, as we are making these plans in all these different states to roll out these phases of how to get people back to work and back to business as usual, we have 3,113,447 cases of COVID confirmed in the world. Over 216,930 deaths around the globe. In the United States, we now currently have over 1,022,259 cases. We are currently at 57,862 deaths, 139,927 people recovered. The states, this is a little bit terrifying. The states' information about the reporting for different states is becoming more and more spotty. For one, as you can see, there's a lot of holes in the reporting. What we do know As I said, as we have over 1 million cases, 300,000 of which have been detected in New York. We now know, because of the antibody testing that is starting to take place, that they believe that nearly 3 million New Yorkinos, I don't know what you call them, people.
New Yorkers.
New Yorkers have now caught the virus,
Wow.
have had the virus. That is way more than the total cases that are being reported, because, of course, we are now able to test in different ways to find out how many actual people have gotten this illness. A lot of people out there are saying, oh, you know what this means? You know what this means? It means a lot more people have had it, which means the number of people that have died is still the number of people that have died. That's not underreported, is it? So that means it's actually even a lower percentage of the population that die from this. That's good news, right? But how many people are expendable? That's the question. Look, if this was just about my freedom versus your freedom and whose rights trump whose, that would be one thing. But let's get something straight. This notion that as we reopen the state, if you're one of those vulnerable people, or you have one of those vulnerable people in your family, all you got to do is just stay home, mind your own business. I'll go out and go party and go to the restaurants, right? It just doesn't fly. Here's one of the many post memes I've seen going around saying, remember, if your state opens before you think it should, keep your pie hole shut. No, it doesn't say that.
Yeah.
But kind of. It basically says, here are your options. Stay home while others go out. That's called freedom.
Yep.
No, I think you're being a little obtuse, because here's the thing. There are some people, and a lot of the people, here's where the disparity comes in, okay? Here's where the disparity comes in. The majority of the people that actually have to take the risk to put their lives at risk so that they can get food on the table are the very people who have to go and work at these very, very dangerous places, who are now considered essential workers, who have some of the lowest paying jobs, frequently a lack of health care, a lack of vacation or benefits that would keep them from going, into debt almost immediately and losing their housing, because they just simply don't have that kind of stability or savings to draw from. And those folks are going to be more in the hurt bag during a global pandemic like this and feel the need to go back to work, because they really just don't have anything to fall back on. So when you say, oh, it's your choice to stay home and do what? Starve?
Yeah.
And what if the people that are the bread earners in those situations also have vulnerable people that live with them, like an elderly person or someone with diabetes? Many of those people that are essential workers have underlying conditions because of their historical lack of poverty, lack of access to health care, lack of, nutritious foods and places to live that aren't covered in pollution, etc. So it's not freedom. It's, pretty much a choice between starvation, death, homelessness, and abject poverty, or some form of survival. We haven't, as governments, state, federal, local, we haven't been meeting that challenge and filling the gap so that those people don't fall through the cracks. And now we're even amping things up more. I've seen so many people in my community that are considered essential workers bracing for when they start to return to work, because they don't feel that we are ready, and they are terrified. Duke, give us some Minnesota numbers. I'm going to start looking for some comments.
Well, the thing with numbers are going up. They keep on getting worse. So when North Dakota is planning an opening in 2 days, I'll show you their numbers in a minute. But in Minnesota, they keep on going up there. It's 365 more cases than the day before, just in one day. 15 more people have died from the virus, bringing the death toll to 301 in Minnesota. And there's still 314 people in the hospital. And in our county, Clay County, we now have 149 positive cases with 10 deaths. We were only at 30 cases last week. And so those numbers are going up. Now, when it comes to North Dakota, in Cass County, it's like North Dakota's numbers are going up. I mean, they were, 49 more positive tests, and most of those were in Fargo, and 41 in Cass County. There's still total deaths are at 19 for North Dakota. And now when you look at the counties, though, there's 942 confirmed cases, and 431 of those are in Fargo. And again, I've been concerned about that because Fargo is the largest population area of North Dakota. And they're going to open up the bars in 2 days. They're going to open up restaurants in 2 days. They're going to open up the shopping centers in 2 days. They're going to open up plants in the manufacturing centers. And Fargo has done terrible in the first place. That's why the cases keep on going up. And North Dakota somehow have created a numbers game that they can look good enough to open up the whole state, while Fargo is getting more and more cases, more deaths, more cases, and more people getting sick.
And this has been brought up on a number of occasions in the press conferences for the president. The president has been asked why the percentage of people of color, Black people, African Americans, and Latinos, and other minorities are so much higher for the COVID deaths as to their percentage in population. And the president said he does not know, but he hates that fact. I can shed some light on that, Mr. President. The reason is because of the places where large concentrations, when I was talking about the caravans and how it's possible that certain states have a higher percentage of asylum cases that win than other states, I said, oh, well, that's simple to answer. There are certain people in our population who have a greater opportunity to be granted asylum depending on what countries they come from and the circumstances that they fled their countries. For example, in Africa, another place, of course, is Cuba, right? We've always known that. So places that have a higher concentration of those populations, and when they flee and move here together, they tend to congregate geographically in certain areas. You're going to have a larger percentage of population of those people living in one geographical area together. Many times, factories, plants, whatever that are brought in, companies that are brought in to those communities for people in those communities to work at will hire many of the same people of color that live in those communities. That's how that happens. It just so happens that in factories and meatpacking plants and a lot of these places where we are seeing these outbreaks, these companies have been running businesses that have become more and more profitable and productive over time. What has been lost in the shuffle is the safety of workers, especially during a pandemic. Even in the best of times, the conditions of work for many of these facilities was not optimal. It was not optimal. And now we are going to thrust all of these people back to work as essential workers. Never mind that we haven't used the Defense Production Act to make the necessary PPE so that we can equip all of our hospital workers, doctors, all the people that are working as first responders, plus all of the essential workers that are not going to be returned to work. We're going to go ahead and do it anyway. Here's the guidelines for North Dakota. Compliance will be for gathering sizes. Capacity will be at 50%. Now, this applies to all restaurants, bars, breweries, distilleries, and food trucks. Even though these businesses perform in very different ways, we're going to have them capacity 50%. Now, 50% is not the same as other places they're opening where they're only opening at 25% capacity.
Yeah.
To obviously, I'm thinking to keep the space between customers much more sparse. You will have to observe physical distancing, just like we have in other places that are open as essential facilities like supermarkets. You got to stay 6 feet apart between groups. You have to increase table spacing by moving tables, marking tables as closed, providing physical barriers between tables. Although, and this makes no sense whatsoever, back-to-back booth seating will still be allowed. Waiting areas, indoor and outdoor, must be marked so that physical distancing standards are met. Restaurants can determine policies for wait areas. Tables must be limited to 10 people per table. 10 people at the same table.
Oh, my God.
This is a disaster already.
Well, I can guarantee you, Friday night, go out to the Empire.
Who's going to follow these rules?
They're not going to. You're going to go in there, and there's going to be a sweat fest of people together. They're not going to be 6 feet apart. In fact, with bars, people stand around and talk. They don't, hardly anyone even sits. People sit at the tables. They're probably 6 feet away from each other in the first place. It's usually standing room only, and their occupancy level is pretty much for standing room in the facility. So you divide that in half, you're still going to have so many people in there. They're just going to be all together in one big mob.
Right now, we are pretending, all the way from the president to the governors of the states, and I told you this a week ago, folks. We are pretending as a nation to avoid liability. I get it. The president is doing the best he can. The state governors are doing the best they can, trying to figure out, how do you keep your economy from coding right in front of you? How do you watch all these businesses die? Not to mention the fact that you know that after the being hit hardest by all of these people getting sick and dying and having to replace a lot of your workforce, the next thing you have to do is deal with the economic downturn and possibly even a famine. So I get it. I understand that. But you are not going to fix the problem by compounding the problem. If we had followed the president's outlines on guidelines on what we were supposed to do, first of all, we wouldn't be opening up as fast as we are, and we would be doing it with a lot more real safety measures that we actually followed and that we enforced in some way. This seems to me like, well, can we get credit for effort? I mean, I was trying to.
Yeah.
I was wearing the mask. Does it count if I wear the mask, even if I wear it wrong all the time? I just don't like the way it feels on my nose.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's what we're really doing here. Let me read some of your comments real quick. Rachel says, no, they should not be given legal papers for doing a job that they're not supposed to be doing. I agree with you, Rachel. They shouldn't be given legal papers for a job they're not supposed to be doing here. But if there wasn't anyone else who was able to do the job because there aren't people willing to go in and do those jobs in unsafe conditions, especially during a pandemic, then maybe the best way to get people to work jobs that nobody else will do right now because they don't want to die is to give them some incentive. An incentive. We're not going to be able to turn to slavery to force people to go in and do unsafe jobs. So we're going to have to find some other way. Otherwise, you're going to see a lot of these businesses fold. That's what I'm saying. They should let low-class criminals do the jobs. That's my opinion. I'm not going to reward a criminal. Well, you know what? In those instances, in that instance, under the law and under the Constitution, prisoners can still be used as slave labor. So you could actually empty prisons and put those people to work in the meatpacking plants and replace them. But then you'd have prisoners working alongside civilians. Maybe you turn all the meatpacking plants into jobs for people that are in prison.
Yeah.
So that you don't mix
labor. Yeah. Completely prison labor.
Rachel, call the president. You got an idea. I don't know. Maybe it's workable.
Because it's not for the workers, it's for the manufacturers.
If they don't want to go to work and then go home, they have to work because they don't qualify for government funding or unemployment because they're illegal criminals, go home. I agree. There's going to be a lot of those people that are going home because they have no way to survive and they have no way to work. And there's nobody hiring underground right now. It's not like you can just go to Home Depot and grab a whole bunch of people and throw them in the back of your truck and go finish your pool. It's not a good time right now. So,
exactly.
Do you think that okay, Seagirl says, I've never thought I'd say this and I've financially supported this channel, but I will be unsubscribing and trying to get everyone I know not to support this socialist channel. No, I am not a socialist. What I am is a reporter telling you the truth about whether or not during a global pandemic, you should be ignoring health guidelines put out by the CDC, especially for workers. And if you guys aren't willing to talk about how do we make sure people don't die, then I have to question whether the name calling or the bashing of informing folks about CDC guidelines and the propensity of folks in these facilities to get sick and die isn't a matter of censoring more than it is a matter of stopping socialism, because it feels like you just don't like the message, so you're labeling it in such a way as for you to be able to censor it. And last I heard, we still have free speech rights in America. Again, you don't like the message, you cannot shoot the messenger, because I didn't create the message. And I'm also not creating the math, the statistics, or the science behind what is about to come. I will remind all of you in a week where we are in terms of numbers, in terms of deaths, and in terms of the meatpacking industry. Because, folks, let me tell you something. Regardless of whether or not what you're saying, it's coming. It's going to happen. Now, in these requirements, I guess they're actually just suggestions. Once again, these are all just suggestions. Nobody's going to be coming in and enforcing that you limit the table to 10 people. They have all sorts of other suggestions about hygiene and cleaning. And the reality, people here in North Dakota are starting to see this. People who are independent contractors, people that are working in these industries. Here's one of the comments with the hashtag North Dakota Dumb. They got the memo, which is titled North Dakota Smart by the governor of North Dakota. And this is what they had to say. Will this help save restaurants? Opening at 50% capacity? Having to print all menus? Cleaning nonstop? You think servers will want to go to work for less than minimum wage and only get 50% of the tables? Who's going to supply all the abundant PPE? Employees themselves? This is set up to fail. A few stir-crazy people will go out, get drunk, and not stay 6 feet apart from one another. Standing in bars is not allowed. Ha! Yeah, okay. Are the employees required to enforce this? The employees will get sick. The establishment will be shut down. Is it worth it? Not now. No. I'll be staying home. I hope you do too. Keep supporting these businesses the best way that you can while being safe. I am so disappointed in this state right now. Hashtag North Dakota Dumb. But at the same time, North Dakota is number 3 in deaths right now. As we are reopening, somebody posted this today. Big shout out to North Dakota Governor Burgum for deciding now is the time to reopen everything. Guess he must be worried about folks not paying rent to him. From today's New York Times, Fargo is number 14th in the country's for highest average daily growth rate of cases of COVID and number 3 in the country for highest average daily growth rate of death.
Wow.
Viva el Republicans. Folks, policy, law, politics, all you want. When it comes to life and death and the numbers of the piling up bodies are hard to ignore, it doesn't really matter what party you're in. People are going to stop no matter what they're doing and notice the dead bodies and notice the closed businesses and notice what's happening. And people are aware that this is just not going to, it's not going to fly. It's not going to work. Here's the thinking of people in North Dakota. This is a letter sent to the Inform, letter to the editor, of how a percentage of the people in our state feel. And this is what they are saying. We are North Dakotans. We don't need to wear masks. If others are stupid enough to get within 6 feet, then the risk is on them. We are libertarian, and we have no responsibility for others who may contract disease based on our choices. We are North Dakota Republicans, and we insist that those libs stay at home without contact with us.
Oh, Jesus.
So basically, we have no responsibility for giving this disease to other people if we are asymptomatic carriers. It's their fault.
Yeah.
Liberals, stay at home, hide under a rock. We get to go back to doing business and running the world. But who do you think serves your coffee? Who do you think is cutting your hair? Who do you think is cutting your meat? A lot of those people are Democrats. It is liberals. And if you want them to go put on their life on the line to get you that sausage, you might have to concern yourself with whether or not there's enough of them alive to do your bidding. Look at the difference between the governor's orders in Governor Abbott in Texas. Here is the executive order in Texas. They begin phase 1 Friday, May 1st. Retail, restaurants, movie theaters, malls, state libraries, museums, they can only open at 25% capacity. How is that going to keep those businesses open?
No, I don't.
Play areas, food courts, dining areas, interactive displays must remain closed. Who knows if people will follow those rules? Mm-hmm. Outdoor sports may be played in groups of 4 or less, and you must observe social distancing. Public swimming pools, bars, gyms, hair salons, barbershops, massage parlors, bowling alleys, video arcades, and tattoo and piercing studios will remain closed. Not in North Dakota.
Nope.
Nursing homes, state-supported living centers, assisted living facilities, long-term care facilities must remain closed to visitors unless providing critical assistance. People should still continue social distancing. Here's the problem. Not only do we have completely different set of rules for all of these different states, nothing is uniform, nothing is enforceable. It's all a suggestion, so it doesn't really matter. What is the incentive for people to enforce this? The president just signed an executive order, or is about to sign an executive order, basically giving meatpacking plants the sense of the feeling that they're umbrellaed under the Defense Protection Act, and that somehow they're going to have an extended protection from liability for whatever happens to their workers if the workers get sick and die en masse. I've already told you, I don't think that exists. Take a look at what's going on in Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. Same time as the governor is opening up, he's got a hot spot where they're making in a sausage plant. 2 of the workers have already died. How many more of them have it? We don't know. And with this new order from the president, will they test? Will they even shut down? Or do you just keep running through your workers? I'm going to go ahead and skip over to the chloroquine tests. The chloroquine, if you were hoping that, the treatment was going to get us past this problem, guess what? They are now saying that this study was cut short over safety concerns because some patients were developing irregular heartbeats and nearly 24 died after taking doses daily.
Oh, my God.
You know what I've learned from looking at these orders, executive orders at the state level? I haven't seen a single order that says that every business needs to take everyone's temperature to make sure that they don't have somebody that's showing active symptoms. I haven't seen someone list all of the symptoms that are currently listed on the CDC website that give you an idea of all of these new symptoms you should be looking out for to ensure that you don't have them. Do you know what they even are? Loss and taste of smell, sore throat, headache, muscle pain, repeated shaking with chills, repeated shaking with chills. You already know about the shortness of breath. You already know about the fever. Did you know about the bruising on the feet? Did you know about the flushed skin and rash, especially in younger patients, and the bruising of the feet? Did you know about the hypoxia, the lack of oxygenation of the blood in the lungs and to the rest of the organs, such that many places, many hospitals are now releasing patients with an oximeter so they can register their oxygen levels? Why are we not implementing that across the board if we are reopening? And if we do give a rip about people's safety, if we're not just going to let the wheels come off and put everyone in the hospital at the same time, why aren't we talking about having oximeters and thermometers, touchless thermometers, and testing people? You know, it could be an easy test. You can have a scented candle and make people tell you what the scent is. If they can't smell it, hey, there's one of the symptoms right there. If they can't taste, if they can't smell, if they have a fever at a distance, when you can test them, if you take their oxygen level and it's low, why would you put those people inside of your business and let them be around your other customers and put your other customers' lives at risk? You know what I know? I know people are going to be looking for responsible businesses. That's what I know. For the Arizona Daily Stars, the companies are seeking reopening, and they're asking Congress. This is not just the meatpacking plants, folks. Companies that are opening for business right now are asking Congress to limit liability from potential lawsuits filed by their workers and their customers as people become infected with the coronavirus. So, since last week, I told you, this is very strange. On the same day that the president is announcing and his task force are announcing the guidelines for reopening, by the way, go over to the White House page. You can see what it says about the reopenings, what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do. I'll show those to you. We're not meeting any of those, and the president is saying, liberate Minnesota, liberate this state, liberate that state, almost directly contradicting the need to follow the guidelines before we liberate or open anything. So I said to you, I see some maneuvering happening, and it has to do with the liability. So you as a government, you're going to have to sue China, but then you have some liability and you have some mitigating factors, and people are going to look at what your government did, state, federal, local, and say, did you put people's lives at risk? Were you negligent? And usually that falls under the guideline of the reasonable person. A reasonable person, a reasonable business should have they knew it and they did nothing, or they should have known and they did nothing. Therefore, you have gross negligence and you put people at risk. That's what makes you liable. And these folks are signaling, just like I told you a week ago. How many of you had seen a single article anywhere on the web talking about limiting liability for our governments, state, federal, otherwise? If you can find one, if you can see a social media discussion about this anywhere, let me know. For those of you just tuning in, you're listening to A Mexican Crossing Lines on 88.1 FM, KPPPLP Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. And folks, I know I am rattling a lot of cages today. I am here to rattle the cages. You know why? Because we have to have these tough discussions. If you are too fragile to hear me tell you that your meat industry, your distribution chain for food is falling apart, and that we, the citizens of this country, have to take matters into our own hands to ensure that we don't have a famine, then you're going to suffer the consequences of ignoring that warning. If you don't want to hear that our businesses aren't going to be saved by unsound, unsafe, unhealthy business practices that are going to limit the ability for employees to protect themselves from the virus, many of whom haven't been able to file for unemployment or can't for whatever reason and have to go back to work. It's going to reduce the workforce because there's going to be a lot of people in those service industries that are going to get sick, and some of them are going to die. So, choose or don't choose to listen to what I have to say. The fact is, it's still going to happen. It's still happening. It's still coming for you. We have to have the serious discussion about what we can do to ensure that we don't kill off our workforce in the process of trying to save our economy. And we have to do it intelligently. Do these orders that you've seen so far in Georgia, in North Dakota, do they go far enough? Do they address all of the issues that I have brought up, including the guidelines set forth by this administration and the CDC? Yes or no? Please don't answer by telling me that I'm a socialist. Can I get an answer to just a yes or no answer? Do these guidelines fit with what the government has told you? I don't think so. By the way, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, and this administration and this task force have told us that in order for us to reopen safely, we needed to have testing ramped up to around millions a day. We're not even up to 500,000. Plus, contact tracing, rampant, ready to go. Do we have that? No. And a treatment. Do we have any treatment?
Nope.
No. So we are putting lives at risk, and I get it. There are a lot of people, especially industry leaders, business leaders, that are yelling, that are praying, that are screaming, we are losing our shirts. We may never recover from this. This is going to be like the Depression. I get it. I'm hearing it too. I'm not deaf to those business owners. But we have to do what's ethical here. I can understand culling back your flock, your pigs, your cows, your sheep, your chickens. I don't understand culling back humans for your meat. Somebody can justify that to yourself. Let me know how you sleep at night. I don't understand it. So yes, people are looking to limit their liability, and they're asking Congress to do it. I'm going to tell you once again, you cannot limit liability for the death, for the lives of workers or customers if you are a reasonable business and you knew or you should have known you were putting people's lives at risk, especially when you weren't following the CDC guidelines, especially when they can show that you have a pattern of behavior of not having safety in place for your workers, of showing that your workers, your employers, even your customers are expendable to you as a cost of doing business. Companies like that will be sued. I guarantee it. And by the way, the people that have been protesting, some of them are already testing positive for COVID. This Vice article shows an anti-lockdown protest leader has now been tested positive for COVID-19. And she's railing against quarantine measures, which she says violate her constitutional rights and deny her freedom of religion. So beyond the step that I told you about, of a certain percentage of our population in America holding the belief, the sincere belief, that them having to wear a mask violates their rights. Libs, quote unquote, should just stay home in their hidey hole and stay away from non-mask wearing patriots and Republicans. It's on you. Go out of your house at your own risk, because the non-mask wearing, I don't need to follow any rules or laws, percentage of our populace isn't going to give a rip about your health. Furthermore, in this Vice article, this woman is arguing, even as she is positive and in quarantine, that she shouldn't have to be in quarantine because that's a violation of her religious rights. Her religious rights. And there is another person, another woman that is also a protester, that she actually lost her dad and is currently positive for COVID, and she is still protesting to have the government reopen. This leader of North Carolina protests against the stay-at-home orders also tested positive. And here is Safe or No Money, which goes back right after the Vice article that we just read. In scene 2. It's the first thing in scene 2, the very first thing. Did we look at that already?
Yeah.
Oh, no, we didn't. We didn't finish it. I wanted to talk about this. This man is sharing his sentiments as to what he's going to be looking for in businesses as he prepares to go back out into the world. He said, I wear a mask to protect other people. Consider it just good manners, like sneezing in your elbow. I don't assume my opinions, contradictory statistics, looking silly, or personal inconvenience matter more than the possibility of making people sick. If I am an asymptomatic carrier, even a small amount of protection is better than none. A lot of us shop small, shop local, and look forward to area businesses reopening. If a business has employees and customers who wear masks and enforce social distancing, I will make it a point to do business there and recommend it to everyone I know. If not, I'll take my money elsewhere. That's it, folks. That's how people in this free market are going to act. They're going to vote with their pocketbook and their feet. If you see businesses doing it the wrong way, let me know. Take pictures, take video, and let us know which ones are your favorite businesses, who's doing it right, who's caring for their business and their customers, who's keeping people safe, who is doing it right. I want to hear from you. What are your opinions? In asymptomatic COVID, you can have somebody like this woman who is asymptomatic for COVID, which she designated herself as in a since deleted post, and be organizing against stay-at-home orders while you're in quarantine, claiming that it is your constitutional right under religious protection. And this woman had her father die of COVID. Her dead dad of 88 years of age contracted the virus. Then she became infected herself. And she still protests, saying, if you're able to go out and do some things, but you're not able to go out and do other things, that to me is not right. You would think that she would be more worried about her father that just passed away, or the fact that she now has contracted COVID, and God knows what her trajectory through this illness will be. She's more concerned about whether it's fair that some businesses are closed while other businesses are open.
Yeah.
And that is just cuckoo to me. We have a comment from Kathleen Fettig saying,
Oh, yeah?
Tonight I heard that England is testing a vaccine, but it will take time. and I also believe Mayo, not positive, is experimenting by treating patients with the plasma of COVID-19 survivors in the hopes that antibodies will help people survive. Thank you for that, Kathy. I believe that plasma therapy is being used at a variety of different locations.
Even in Fargo.
Yes, even in Fargo.
Yep.
They're starting to do that. And there's a lot of promise for that, although we don't know what the long-term efficacy of that will be, what long-term immunity that gives, or if it does give any long-term immunity. So that remains to be seen. And the test for vaccines goes on. We just heard, Kathy, you might be interested in this. In Mexico, they're trying to develop one of only 6 tests to to make a vaccine that is DNA based. So they're going to map the genomes and figure out a way to change the DNA of people, to treat their DNA to cure them. It sounds like it's supposed to be a cheaper and faster way of getting a vaccine, but I'd never heard of it, so I'm a little skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hopeful for Mexico to do something that amazing, but it sounds like you might be skipping some steps there that I just never heard you could do before. So I'm a little bit skeptical about whether or not that's even possible. Let's take a look at what's happening in San Diego. California has a rash of rallies, including one in San Diego, and people are getting fines. You can face a fine and jail time if you are organizing some of these rallies. People are also ignoring rules to stay off of public places like beaches. In Huntington Beach, this was the scene with hundreds of people ignoring social distancing rules and closed beaches.
Mm-hmm.
You saw this all over California. People really do have cabin fever,
Yep.
as the president has expressed. And unfortunately, I believe the result of this is going to be that a lot of people could get sick. You know what's even worse? The president is already signaling that he wants schools to reopen. Trump messaged through governors that they should probably seriously consider reopening public schools before the end of the academic year.
Wow.
And as you know, many have already stated they're not going to open
It's
till next year.
almost May. School ends in May.
Yeah.
So you get everybody to school and you say, okay, out for summer. Wouldn't make any sense.
Love My Puppy comments, we are nowhere close to being ready. I can't even get masks and get more gloves, let alone get tested. I'm not about to risk my family's health since we all have underlying issues. Yeah, I feel you. There are 50% of Americans that have comorbidities that makes them at higher risk. That's not something to sniff at. I don't know how we can reconcile putting 50% of our population who are at greater risk of dying or being permanently scarred by this disease at higher risk just to get our economy going again. I mean, I know that Americans have the greatest resiliency of any country on earth. I believe that we could come up with solutions that could save lives and keep our government going. I mean, look at what we did. In the past, we've used government subsidies to farmers to take surplus food and then give it back to people in the form of commodities.
Yeah.
Why aren't we jumping in and doing that? We can figure out different distribution streams. Why don't we use the existing distribution streams that is meant to go to manufacturers and to big companies, to resorts, and figure out a way to turn those into co-op buys for regular communities, towns, and cities. Treat us as the school system or the big cafeterias or schools that you're selling to, but don't throw all that food away. Come on. I mean, we are problem solvers. We should be able to figure this out. And, one of the biggest criticism I have, and I'm going to share the link to the criteria for reopening for the White House, because they put this out at the same time that these protests began to take place and that the president started to signal that he wanted governments to go ahead, wink, weed, nod, nod, open up their governments. But they said they wanted us to follow gated criteria which means that we would have a downward trajectory of influenza-like illnesses reported for a 14-day period. That we would have a downward trajectory in the cases, in the symptoms, and also that we would treat all patients without crisis care. In an alternative to this, and we're not there yet. We're not even there yet. So the fact that people are reopening without that is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
We have core state responsibilities that include testing and contact tracing, healthcare system capacity being where it needs to be, and plans for the safety of workers in critical industries like meatpacking.
Yeah.
Are we there yet?
No.
No. Yet we're still reopening, flying in the face of the president's own guidelines and criteria for gated reopening, for state responsibility. Temporary oxygen. Let's take a look at the different additional issues that the CDC has now identified on their website as additional symptoms that might indicate someone is shedding virus, is contagious. High temperature, low oxygen, loss of taste, loss of smell. Are any of those addressed on the guidelines for the phases of the employers? No. They say temperature check. They say sanitation. They say use and disinfecting of common areas, high traffic areas, limiting business travel, social distancing, PPE. Where is the monitor for oxygen? Where is testing whether people can smell or taste? Because a lot of those people, they don't show symptoms. They don't show these particular symptoms, which are apparently the only ones that we're looking at, even though the CDC has now put out new guidelines telling us these are all new symptoms we have to look for. We're not integrating that even in the guidelines that the president and the White House are putting out. And that is problematic. Individuals. This is what the White House says all individuals' responsibilities are. You should continue to shelter in place. Members of households with vulnerable residents, should be aware that by returning to work or other environments where distancing isn't practical, they could carry the virus back home. And of course, that infers that if your loved one that is vulnerable gets sick, they could die. Mm-hmm. So you should take every precaution to isolate from vulnerable residents. All individuals, when you're in public, whether that's a park, outdoor recreation area, should maximum physical distance. Should social settings be of more than 10 people where appropriate distancing may not be practical, they should be avoided. Avoid socializing in groups of more than 10. Minimize non-essential travel and adhere to the CDC guidelines. What else do we see?
That's it.
They don't even mention the mask. They don't even say about the mask. So is it any wonder that people are terrified to go back to work when we do not have safety in place for folks? I don't think it's fair. Here's what the Wall Street says. They say we only really have 4 states that meet the criteria for the White House. The White House's 3 proposed criteria that you're supposed to have. And that would be Washington, Montana, Wyoming, and Kansas.
Not North Dakota.
Not North Dakota, no. We're not there yet. The findings are based on the guidance suggested in the White House reopening plans, which I just showed you. The plan recommends, but it does not require, not even the White House requires, that states hold off on reopening non-essential businesses until they see 14-day declines in flu-like symptoms of positive COVID cases or positive COVID tests. Hospitals can treat all of their patients, not just COVID emergencies, and there is a robust testing program that includes antibody testing that can confirm whether someone has been exposed to the coronavirus. Just 4 of the 50 states meet all White House criteria to begin phased reopening. That's Kansas, Montana, Washington, Wyoming. Michigan and New Jersey are at least prepared to thaw out their business sector, meeting none of the White House criteria, according to Raymond James, an analyst. Most states have met 1 or 2 of the points needed to start reopening, but even that might be overstating their readiness. Notably, although very few states are green per this analysis, none are truly ready according to Open America Up Again criteria, as many do not have widespread antibody testing. Antibody testing can reveal how many people in a given area have been exposed to COVID-19 and who might be immune to the illness and are not showing. These are particularly important because many people infected show no symptoms or very mild symptoms. A recent sample test done in New York revealed 2.7 million residents may have been exposed. That's about 10 times the number that have tested positive in New York. Georgia, notably, is among the least prepared states in the union, according to the Wall Street analyst, who pointed out the number of confirmed cases of COVID in the state have grown by an average of 15% per day in the last 2 weeks. Good luck, Georgia.
Yeah.
Georgia scores in the top 50% of states that should not reopen. A separate study by the Dartmouth Atlas recently found that cases of COVID-19 are growing fastest in the states that are considering reopening soon, including those in the South and in the Midwest. So, vaya con Dios. If you leave your house, do so at your own risk, because there are people out there that are not going to put on the mask, that do not care about whether or not you have a vulnerable person at home, have diabetes, an underlying heart condition, or asthma. They don't care about your kids getting sick. They don't care about your nana dying. They don't care if their business meets the CDC guidelines or the White House guidelines or any guidelines whatsoever. To them, being able to do whatever they want and make people sick, if that is what happens, is their right, is what freedom in America means to them. And they're going to go forward under that premise. And you will have to go at it at your own risk. Truly. I know that there is no notice currently, because I looked for signs that said what the one behind me says, which is, notice, not responsible for death or damage to people or their families. Nobody in their right mind would go into that business, into that company and work. Nobody would go into that country, for that matter, where nobody is responsible for anything that happens. Why, that would be the wild, wild west. And we got past that a long time ago. But apparently, that is exactly what businesses, what state governments, what political groups, and even our president's administration are signaling that they want: a free-for-all. So, vaya con Dios. May God bless all of you, because you are on your own. You're taking your own life into your hands every time you leave your home, every time you go to these businesses and these grocery stores. There's going, it was a lot safer when we were under this suggested lockdown, because in North Dakota, they never even had one. People were only going out when it was necessary. The peer pressure of most people quarantining in place and not putting the rest of the family members at risk by going out and having parties kept people from going and doing those things, thumbing their nose at the safety and the well-being of the rest of their community. But now that it's a free-for-all, now you have to watch your own back. Now when you go out, you have to go out at your own risk. Don't expect your community members to be responsible enough to care about making sure you feel safe or your family members feel safe. And that means prolonged and rolling shutdowns in companies, in businesses, in restaurants, increased spikes, especially here in the Midwest, of sick and dying from COVID. Another rash of lack of PPE in all businesses that are running now, not just hospitals and clinics. And more healthcare workers having to restrict their access to their families to try and keep us alive. God help us all. I want to leave you with this image. Here's a dad that was recently reunited after more than a month with his toddler. This heartwarming scene took place as dad is home once again.
What you got?
He just looks over and notices his dad. This is in South Wales. He points at him. Dad, he says.
Mm-hmm.
And his dad just opens his arms and grabs him, and he cries. They're so happy. That's Dada, he says. And he points at him. That's Dada. Let's watch it one more time. Do you see his recognition of his dad? He's like, Dad. Folks, I hope you're staying safe out there. I live in a rural community. I don't have to worry about the just massive crowds of people that most folks have to worry about in big, metropolitan areas. But I pray for every American out there because as I showed you from letters to the editor and posts about what people think of as their right and as their freedom, there are people out there that are about themselves first. And at the same time, I reside in a part of this country where the temperature is cold most of the year, but people have very warm hearts and are all about protecting their community. So I expect to see a lot of that resiliency and beauty coming out in these difficult times. But I do warn you, as far as the law and leadership goes, protecting us from becoming sick when we go out, going back to work, going back to business as usual, you're on your own. You've got to take your own risk. And I will be praying that things turn out for the most part for the better. It's all we can do is hope. Unfortunately, there will be a lot of pain and suffering in the mix as well. So I'll be documenting and thinking about all of this as we continue throughout this week. God bless. Good night. Thanks for being with the Mexican Crossing Lines here with Cindy Gomez-Schempp.
And Duke Gomez-Schempp.
You've been listening to 88.1 FM KPPPLP Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding a local color to your airwaves. Good night.